right, we are live. This is Formula One Fans of America, episode 9. Good to see you guys. Mondays are my new favorite days. This week we're going to talk about the 2012 season. Thanks to Greg correcting me when I said I can't remember which year it was, but it was like the best in the last 20 years. I think it was about this season. I was saying this is like the best of like the modern era or since 2000, and you're like, you need to know your history. Go back and look at 2012. So I did, and I absolutely love that season. I can totally see why you suggested it. We'll kick off right now with we were right, we were wrong. I think it's safe to say that at this point in time, I was wrong about DR3. I thought that he would have at least kept his seat. He would have finished the season. Something would have happened with Checo. I mean, there's potential for some speculation here. You know, we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode. But yeah, at this point, I'll go ahead and call it as I was wrong. But let's jump into 2012, Sir Gregory. We had 7 different winners in the first 7 races. That's remarkable. Like, I don't know when that's ever happened in F1. Having 7 different winners in an F1 season seems foreign to us at this point in time. And that was one of the reasons why I think we've had 5 or 6 this year. And I was like, man, this is why it's so exciting. We've had 7 this year. No way. All right. So even better. Like that was what was drawing the commentary out of me, that like this season has been one of the most exciting we've had on like recent record, or at least recent memory.
Yeah.
7 number fact, 7 different world champions on the grid at once. That's pretty cool to me. So like some very familiar names. I mean, you had Vettel, Alonso, Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button, Nico Rosberg, Michael Schumacher. I mean, that lineup in a race at all, like if you follow the sport even loosely, you know these names, you know who these people are, and that they're absolute legends in the sport. To have them all on the track at the same time was very cool. Another favorite moment of mine, familiar name, Senna. There was a Senna on the grid scoring points with Michael Schumacher, Ayrton's nephew. So that was pretty cool to see too. Kind of like a little nostalgic, nice, heartwarming point that, you hear that name on the grid, and you also still hear Michael Schumacher's name on the grid. So definitely love that season. What were some of your favorite moments, Greg?
So the variety was great. The fact that, we were coming out of, a spell where we weren't sure who was going to win each season. And this was getting into like the domination of the Vettel era. So, it was like, oh, thank gosh, like Vettel's not just going to run away with it. And to his credit, he kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And that's what we come to know about Vettel, is that the guy's just never going to give up. He had a Schumacher-esque drive to him. Just very, very just constant pressure, right? Didn't crack. And, it's different than some of the other people we see that we talk about nowadays, like Max, having similar like high levels of drive, but just different delivery, different attitude. So there's some wild stuff. So while we have 7 different drivers winning this year, slightly different scenario. Max jumped out to an early lead, and we've just been trying to pick away. I say we, but like the other drivers have been trying to just pick away at his lead the whole season. Whereas the 2012 and even 2010, those seasons, the championship would change every time. And from a ratings perspective and from a spectator enjoyment perspective, I find it more interesting when there's some back and forth in the championship, when one team gets out in front and just dominates, like during the Mercedes era, when just a couple years after 2012 when we started the turbo hybrid era, and then when Newey got his head wrapped around that era, and you see Max Verstappen dominating. To me, that's just not as interesting. So my big question, now that we've done some 2012 throwback research, are we actually in a better spot? Are these cars better? And we'll get to this in the tech talk a little bit later about why the cars are the way they are now versus back then. But personally, I'm happy to see the level of competition we currently have. And I put that down to the budget. There was no budget cap back in the 2012 era, and teams could just spend pretty much whatever they could find as far as sponsorship. But nowadays, like, there's a cap. They have to like move people around and manage that stuff. And while that might not talk to the average Drive to Survive viewer, I think if they get into the sport more, they'll start to realize that like money matters. Money really has the large dictating effect over who wins these races. So that's why you'll hear people say like, oh, if so-and-so just had a good car, he'd be the best. And they might be right, because there can be some huge differences in what's behind the drivers, in the cars, and in the factories that build those cars. So yeah, that's why I think 2012 is a great way to segue and take stock of where we currently are in Formula One. So.
You had far more mechanical failures back then, and then you still had engine restrictions coming into play that we didn't have in previous generations. So it was like, hey, stop the car on the track right now. We can't lose this engine, whereas before you would get 2 or 4 engines a weekend, and blow right through them. So it was interesting for a strategic point that's all starting to come into play. And these, trying to keep the field tighter and tighter really is what they're ultimately doing, trying to make things a little bit more even for the constructors. But you're absolutely right, where like money plays all of the impact in this sport, which is why Lance Stroll still drives an F1 car. Sebastian Vettel coming out of the pits and getting on the podium, starting the race from the pits and making the podium. I think he took third. Was my favorite moment of 2012. Like you're saying, that Schumacher-esque of just like resiliency and like willingness to overcome all obstacles in front of you. And I think my favorite moment was when he was getting interviewed and they said, "Did you ever imagine or think that you could have been here on the podium from where you started the race?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, actually I did. I believed in myself. That's why I'm standing here."
I was once told no good racing driver isn't arrogant. And I was like, wait, sorry, say that again. And what they meant is like racing drivers have to believe that they can do the impossible, and it makes them sound arrogant. But you hear it all the time in a lot of hobbies and sports and whatnot. They're like, eyes on the prize. Motorcycle, it's always eyes up, look where you want to go. And it's the same thing, same mentality for them. They're just like, oh yeah, all I got to do is pass 19 or 20 cars or something like that, and I get myself a podium. Like,
it was a field of 22. He started in 22nd place and finished third.
So he started one place higher than Nick DeVries ever finished in a championship. Noted. Okay.
So unkind. I mean, yeah, and also like Schumacher's farewell season too. When second favorite moment was when he let Vettel pass him on the final race, and it was kind of like a salute, a tip of the cap to another German driver, and it was like, all right, go get yours, man. Way to go, young man. Like you're the new thing now. And it was his third championship in a row, so it really is like a farewell to one of the greatest of all times, and like a salute and a tip of the cap to one of the newer generational talents. So I loved seeing that. It was just kind of a really cool moment for the two of them, at least, but I think all of us as racing fans. Fabian, what is your favorite moment of 2012?
So I'll bookend that with these two statements. One, the cars were ugly as shit. I hated the busted nose on those cars. I thought that was just, I don't know. It was crazy. What was it? They had to lower the noses 150 millimeters or whatever it was. So you wound up with those big snoots on them. They were weird. It was really odd. What stuck out to me, and I'll tell you what my favorite moment was, and it's a sequence of 3 things that were tied together. What was going on with Hamilton's pit stops that season? They were just horrendous. I mean, they were bad. Yeah, look at that. Look at the nose on this thing. Like this is, I don't know.
The nose, the wing, like
the wing was really, really like erect and narrow. The nose was this big, looked like a silverback's nose, like you could look right up into there. It's just strange, just a strange design, honestly. Cars, I mean, these guys are whipping those things around. They do amazing things with the equipment they're given. I got to give them credit. But I noticed in reviewing that season that Hamilton had a very shoddy pit crew. They were not disciplined. They were not deliberate. They were sluggish. They were inaccurate. They had a lot of problems. Like there was a lot going on there. And it caused him a lot of grief. Of course, they had some mechanical issues and things as well. But, being that I am a big Lewis fan and I like the history of his racing journey and all that, I pay attention to that. And I thought to myself, how frustrated would I be if I was in his shoes when you got a car that really is performing very well and you perform well and you've got to deal with things that take you out of contention because you can't trust the pit stop. Terrible. But
that car was also plagued with alternator issues throughout the season, and he had multiple times where he had to DNF because of car issues. And you're right, like that pit crew should have been scrapped and replaced. I have no idea why. Like, there's no excuse for that.
The rear jack
had like 14, 17 second pit stops when it should have been under 5. Like, come on, man. You're literally costing him positions, races, and points in the championship, and cost him probably quite a few podiums. I am perplexed. Do you think that played in, like the team's not giving him the support that he needs, the car that he needs? Do you think that played into his decision to ultimately leave?
I would think it would ultimately. I mean, honestly, you know, he's a guy that looks at the sport in a totality. You know, he's got the engineering mind, he's got the process mind, he's got the driver mind. You know, he's not just the guy that's got that innate driver talent. He's not, you know, Cole Trickle. He just shows up on the track and just whips it around the track, and they're like, "Whoa, where'd this guy come from?" He doesn't know anything about the sport, right?
Really, Days of Thunder? We're going there.
Yeah, Days of Thunder. I really am.
You leave Days of Thunder alone. Fabian is correct.
I didn't say anything about it. I'm just saying.
So
great movie, a solid reference.
Cars is my favorite car movie. No, Days of Thunder, sir.
Lies.
Whippersnapper.
What's going on in the 2026 season, bitch? Don't even.
One day we'll all get together online and virtually do a triple Tom Cruise day, and we'll do Cocktail, Days of Thunder, and you know, something else. But anyway, no, I really do. I think that you could tell, because even when he was that young, you got to give the guy credit. He was very measured in the way that he responded to things. You know, he could get emotional in the heat of it. But when they would interview him right after those races, you know, he'd be, well, you know, I put my best foot forward. I did the best I can. We learned from it. We'll try to move on and get better. Right. But I'm sure the scene behind there, you know, behind the curtain was something very, very different. The rear jack guy in particular was an abomination. It looked like almost every single time he had something to do with what was going wrong with the pit stop. But there's a sequence that occurred: Singapore, Japan, and Korea. To me, was the most pivotal moment of the entire season. To me, you know, you had Alonso basically in the lead. You know, Singapore. You know, Hamilton. You know, I think he won that race, and you know, he's doing okay. And then the next thing you know, you've got this Alonso Raikkonen DNF situation where Alonso goes out, they make contact, and it wipes Alonso's point total right off the map. And then Vettel comes in Korea and wins, which is his 3rd in a row or something to that effect, or close to, probably 2 in a row, 3 in a row, whatever it was.
He won 3 in a row coming off the break, and that's where it was like, and yeah, he was close. I think he was like almost like two races behind Alonso, which again, something I love, because it's like, you ever heard of these names? Because some of these dudes are still around 12 years later, scoring points and podiums. So like, yeah, Fernando Alonso, one of the all-time greats. But yeah, no, he came out and just like blitzed in and won 3 races in a row.
That sequence,
the best adjective for
that sequence was where I felt like, even though Vettel had some hiccups like Abu Dhabi, some different things that went on, that was the sequence that really solidified Vettel's chance at nailing that season down. And it really looked like it took a toll on Alonso. It really did. I mean, there's some really interesting imagery from that segment where Alonso went from being that arrogant, cocky, having fun. You could see the fun he was having, and it wasn't on his face anymore.
He had the worst car significantly, I believe. And so I think that's where it was. Is like, this is like a 3rd place car pretty much, but he's driving the hell out of it.
He drove the snot out of it.
And like, great wheel-to-wheel racing, like really great wheel-to-wheel racing that we saw in passing and overtaking, and guys like coming close to each other but not touching each other. Man, yeah, some of the greatest action. So like another plug and shout out to Formula One TV. Some of the best money I've ever spent. But go back, like do yourself a favor, especially during this break, scratch the itch, go back and watch. There's a 48-minute documentary of how 2012 was won. And you'll get a good synopsis of all this. But also you can go back and watch the 10 to 15-minute race summaries. And so that's what I did. Like I just sat in the jacuzzi and watched every single race from 2012.
Formula
One.
Who do you work for?
It was on my weekend.
Benefits from really good commentary. Like, so when you do get a chopped up version of a race, the commentary does such an incredible job of filling in gaps. Those guys actually do an incredible job of cross-referencing things and replaying things that happened earlier. And the way they do it, that you don't wind up with just, because some of the really old ones were terrible. Like it's hard to watch those race recaps because you don't even understand what the hell is going on. But these more recent ones, the 2008s and earlier, have really been right for 15, 12-minute, recaps. So you can make a good point. Because for what is it, $80 for a season, I think is F1 channel or something like that. And
it's like $75, $85 for the full year.
You can't beat it, man. It's phenomenal.
I love it, especially when you're watching the races and like it is absolutely essential. We'll talk about Vegas later, I guess, probably next week. But from my experience, if you go to an F1 race, it's best to like bring your AirPods and have F1 TV on in the background. You can switch between the driver radios, and like that's where it's really cool. And you start to get even more involved in the race and what's going on.
Right?
It's like, oh, I can see something happening on the track. Let me tune into this driver's radio and see what they're saying, and then you can switch back to the broadcast.
That's nice.
I don't want to give NASCAR too much credit, but their fans have had this luxury for a long time where they show up, they buy like the NASCAR earmuffs and everything. When I went to the 24 hours of Daytona, so endurance racing,
I did it.
Long ass
I did
race.
it in 2008. Yeah, I went to a NASCAR race in 2008 at Texas Motor Speedway, and they had that. It was like a Motorola radio and headset, and you want it because the cars are so F-wording loud. You're going to go deaf throughout the day. This way you have earmuffs, and you can switch between all the driver radios. Super freaking cool. Really great feature. You get that baked into your F1 TV subscription. So shout out to Formula Media. Approve us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Promise.
Yep.
So I think we're all forgetting about a favorite moment here. The greatest Kimi Räikkönen quote ever: "Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing."
Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. One of the other great drivers that was on the grid that year. Just cool. Yeah. Like you just had like a hit list of amazing driving and drivers. And what a really great year for Formula One.
And
thank you, Greg.
Shout out to Räikkönen. He only had one win that year, but finished third. Like he mathematically had a chance pretty far in. He also had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 DNFs and somehow was still in third. Like, holy moly. That's impressive. Like
that's what's crazy exciting. I do like what you're saying though, like where it's the top 3 positions, they're laddering back and forth with who's going to win the drivers' championship, and it's not a gimme every single weekend. I also that's what I loved about it was 7 different winners in the first 7 races. Like this is a season. This is cool. This is going to be fun to watch play out for the next 13, 14 races. Awesome stuff. Very solid recommendation, sir. This is a good break topic. Let's get let's get into some history though. Let's go back to our graphic. And let's start talking about the differences between these cars.
While Rich is loading that up, does anybody know what season in F1 had the most winners?
Oh,
I don't, but I like this trivia question. Hit me.
1982 had 11 different winners in the season out of 16 races. Now, also, because you guys mentioned Rosberg earlier, his dad was the one that won that year with only 1 race win.
Is it Rosberg, you said?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Neat. Very cool.
You mispronounced
it.
Rosberg. Like his name was
I don't care enough.
Something weird.
I don't care enough.
So this
All
is
right,
the
so we do-
RB12. This is what they were running back in 2012, and you'll tell me when to switch slides, but we'll have that
Sure.
side by side comparison. Not to scale.
So-
I'm not good at graphics. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all good. So let's do some obvious differences here. That apartment building of a wing in the back, the goal behind that thing was to have a smaller channel of air being thrown up over the following car. So all you had to do was just be slightly off center from somebody and you still have a reasonable amount of downforce and chase. Turns out that wasn't really the solution there. We know this after the fact, but at the time, before they came to these big wings, they were like, we got to change something. We can't follow these cars. We know now that brake ducts actually have a massive effect on this. And we also see those little winglets nowadays over top of the front tires. That produces a significant amount of control, I should say, over the vortices that come off the front tires. So those are things that all the teams have to run. It's mandated in the rules. You can also see that in this rule set, the front wing was largely not governed by much except how low it could be. But we saw this was the era where flexing really came into play and all the teams started to embrace it. There were some shots where the front wing on the RB was just dragging around the track and nobody cared because that's where it made the downforce and did its thing. So not very well seen in this shot, but the height of the front wings. Rich, do we have another shot that shows the two wings side by side by any chance?
Yeah, let me go to the third slide.
There you go. So see how much lower the new RB wing is. So what was happening there was
scraping.
Yeah. So the difference here and what teams were getting at was in 2010-ish, 2011-ish, they realized that the higher they made the nose of the car, the actual like peak of the nose, not the wing itself, but just the nose, the more air would get up into the barge boards and where they could manage it around the Coke bottle into the rear diffusers and rear wing elements and whatnot. So they were basically trying to get unobstructed air underneath the wing, underneath the nose, above the wing, so they could then deal with it as they saw fit for many things. Now, granted, these 2012 cars, they were not ground effects cars. They were still making some downforce from the bottom end of the car, the floor area, but not nearly as much. But they still wanted to manage that. The problem with these high wings is that they were getting really close to just spearing drivers in the head. So 2012 saw these regulations where there were like a drop nose, which was, obviously ugly as can be, the busted nose, as Fabian put it. And that was to get around the rules. The rules said, hey, you got to drop these noses down so that we're not spearing people in the face when you get side impacts and whatnot. So the teams were like, yeah, sure, no problem. So they dropped the first 2 feet of the nose down and went right back to being high again. The noses were super thin at that point, right? So this was the era where, and we'll get into this in the next part of the tech talk, durability, as long as your front wing was bolted to the car, you're fine. Like you could wreck the back half of the car and whatever. Like the Aero was front wing, rear wing, and that was largely in this era. And there's another thing that went into that. No more blown diffusers in 2012. So the exhausts went from being, most of the teams were blowing the rear diffuser where they would put the exhaust down low and it would point at the diffuser and it would leave the throttle plate open when the driver, quote unquote, lifted off the gas. And they would just keep pumping air to the back tires so that it would go around a corner and it wouldn't spin out. Well, they said, oh, you guys got to stop doing that. So they mandated that they put the exhaust really, really far up. There's a great picture floating around on the internet somewhere where some teams had actually pointed the exhaust into the rear brake ducts. And you'd think, that's madness. That's hot exhaust. You're going to melt those rear brakes. Well, Formula One brakes are actually really good at getting rid of heat. And if you blow any kind of extra airflow at a brake duct, you can just point the brake duct up to make downforce. And now you're making downforce at the tire and not through the chassis. And like, holy moly, whole new idea about how to make downforce. So then they had to write rules around that. So this thing
Didn't
about like
Max DNF because his brakes caught on fire this year?
He did, but
His brake
that was a different
exploded.
issue. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not an FIA investigator.
Incoming brake diffuser thing from Fabian. Let's hear it.
You're muted.
Fabian's muted, but I think I know what he's saying. Yeah.
I've turned another leaf. I'm totally in the camp of Jay on Red Bull not having used any asymmetrical braking devices on their vehicle whatsoever. I mean, they would never do such a thing. That's not the kind of operation that they are.
Mm-hmm.
I still say the FIA would have fucking owned their asses if they would have had the chance to do it.
So these new regulations.
Let's get back. Yeah, sorry, Greg.
I was going to say, Adrian Newey. It may have taken him a second to get a handle on this, but they produced so many updates back in this era. I'm positive that he got on. He knew what he was doing from 2010, 11, and now here we're talking about 12 with the car here on the left. That guy is the magic button. Now there's also Ross Brawn, which we'll get to with the Mercedes cars, and Brawn from 2009. This is all by Adrian's design. Like once he starts working well with a car, like game over. Whoever's got his designs is going to be coming to the front. The last big delta we'll talk about here, actually, and a small one. The wings in these cars were where they generated all their downforce. 2012, the floor was not the major component, whereas nowadays they realize that ground effect actually is a great way to have cars follow each other because ground effect throws a lot less air up. It's all about suction, so the air stays connected to the ground, and the following car can connect with that air and use it for downforce as well. So big difference here. You can't even see it. Is that the wings, they're not doing nearly as much. They have far less angle of attack. I wouldn't say far less surface area, but that lower angle of attack is doing less with the air, and they've mandated the little like flip ups on the side of the front wing. The rear wing is mandated that it rolls off, so it doesn't make like such hard vortices. And of course, we got the little tire. I don't know what you'd call those things, little tire wings on the over the front tires. So those are some of the big deltas. Some little things, this is more F1 technology moving on. The 2012 cars, a lot of them had tubular suspension arms, so it's just a metal rod. And they tried to make them as small as possible to keep them out of the wind. Nowadays, teams understand that those suspension arms are wings. They are there to manage airflow past the front axle and past the rear axle, and they do all kinds of fun stuff with them. So even if they have, say, anti-dive up front, and they arrange them in a certain way, they're also going to arrange how they point so that they're pointing air down into the barge boards and around the Coke bottle and whatnot. So that leads into durability, right? Back in the day, you could grab one of those suspension arms and it wouldn't go anywhere. Nowadays, you'll see like marshals trying to push cars and they'll actually like bend the suspension arms because they're only meant to be loaded in certain angles, and they are so thin that they're not really going to manage those loads. So I think we see a lot more damage to cars today, especially in floor.
That's interesting.
You get somebody takes like a side bump. Now all of a sudden they're like, you got to pit. You're down 7 points on downforce. There's no sense working this engine. We're going to retire the car because you got a bump. Like this is the era we're in right now. So I did appreciate the bumping and banging they were able to do back then, even though back then I thought these cars are fragile. No, they're real fragile nowadays, especially fragile to those subtle little differences in downforce, especially from the floor. And durability. You talk about engine and powertrain. You noted how many alternators, of all things, an alternator went bad for Red Bull, and it went bad a number of times. So nowadays with the penalties and the amount of points and money that's on the line, the engineers are like, no, we're going to make components go the distance, and for the most part, they do. So that's what I got.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
dude,
good tech talk.
Killed it.
So I have a question on these.
Yes.
How much of a death trap were the 2012 cars comparatively to what they are now?
That's a great question. Look at Joe Gonyu's crash. Look at Hamilton taking a tire to the helmet. Max taking that 50G impact to the wall without the halo.
Roman Grosjean.
Oh my God.
Because that halo, like we've saved a lot of lives already. You could easily rattle them off right there. Well, I was surprised because what was it, the Italian Grand Prix where they had that giant pileup and it was a Lotus that launched over, I think, a Red Bull. Like that was scary as shit. And they didn't have halos back then, but like something similar like that is the reason why we have the halo now. Because it was so close to just taking somebody's head off. So dangerous as shit. So I think they were pretty significant death traps, and we're lucky we got the outcome we did in some of these crashes.
So now I know the halo because obviously the anniversary of Jules Bianchi's death was this past weekend for the 10-year. I know the halo was created because of Bianchi. The crash that he had in Suzuka, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken.
In the rain.
Yeah, because the tractor was not where it was supposed to be is why he died. But literally, that is the entire reason why they brought out the Halo, was because of him. And interesting point there. I mean, yes, the lesser series have seen, 2 deaths, maybe 3 deaths? I can't remember. But in F1, there's not been a death since Jules Bianchi. So that is 10 years without a death. I was actually talking to my uncle about this the other day. Like, you couldn't even go 10 races in some seasons without a death happening. You know, so it's like, how much have they actually improved the car from 2012 to 2024 with, I know, the titanium bathtubs, the halos. I think there's a couple of other ones that we're all forgetting, but like the amount that they've put in, like people want to complain about how big and ugly and this, that, and the other that these cars are becoming. But it's like everything that they have done is to protect the drivers at this point. Because
cars are physically larger too. So like just like crumple zones and normal cars, they're physically bigger cars now. So while they might hit harder, there's also more area to absorb. So there's that factor as well that leads into it.
Funny that you brought that part up, because I was just going to bring up the Monaco crash with Checo, where literally 15 years ago, Checo would be dead right now. Like, there is zero questions that he would be just gone. But the way that these cars are designed now is that they're meant to explode. That's why you see that big ass, like, all the pieces coming off of it. It's to absorb the crash damage and the G's as much as humanly possible. So it's just incredible to me that people want to sit there and complain, like, oh yeah, you know, this, that, and the other. Like, okay, cool. Why don't we bring back in race refueling while we're at it? You know, like, what else can we do to make this a little bit more dangerous? So definitely an interesting time, if you will. But I'll get off my soapbox on that one.
So there was also a familiar name on the grid in 2012. It was his sophomore season, but Daniel Ricciardo scoring points on the grid.
Checo's freshman.
Checo was on the grid too.
Yeah, that was his freshman season. And it was funny because he was a Ferrari Academy driver. And literally Ferrari's like, he's not ready for the big time. Simple as that. He goes, hold my beer, and takes second in Monza. Like,
he scored 60. He scored 66 points and was in 10th place that year in his freshman year. Checo was a beast. Like, we cannot forget that. You know, he came out onto the grid with ferocity and force. Obviously not the outcome towards the end of his career 12 years later. We're not speaking about him in the same vein, but he's always been a good driver in Formula One.
So,
true.
I'm not going to take anything away from Checo up until 2023.
Gotcha.
Once 2023
Nico Hülkenberg was on the grid back then too, by the way.
So
another very, very, yep. And so, I mean, I like Grosjean. I don't know why you're pointing that out.
No. I'm saying like he was in there in addition to it, not like pointing anything else out. Like there was a lot.
Oh, I just
recently left.
I was just saying Hülkenberg is still currently driving F1 driver. Grosjean is not. Hülkenberg. He's driving for. Fuck you.
Never gonna hit a podium.
Man. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. 2026 regulations and the way that things are going, it might change. We don't know that.
At this point, if he does not get a podium, the fact of the matter is like, if he doesn't get one in 2025, I don't know how much of a hope there is for him to get one, like, period. And
how much hope is there for him to get a podium driving a shitty car?
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. That's why I'm saying there's not much hope for him in 2025. 2026, I don't necessarily know if it's going to get any better, because that's like,
he just needs to score points,
them in
which he's
2025
doing.
or 2026. I can't remember.
26, I believe. It doesn't matter as long as he scores points. He's scoring points in a shitty car and a lower tiered car. So that's all he needs to do. We're talking about Hulkenberg right now. Welcome back, Greg. We're talking about my man, Nico Hulkenberg, who was on the grid in 2012, scoring points.
Still haven't hit a podium.
His young career was outstanding. Like, there's a couple documentaries on him, and I was like, really, on Nico? And I sat and watched it and was like, I need more popcorn. I need some tea. We're spilling it here. Like, the dude was just dominant. So I almost think he's like, yeah, this should have been my sport. Like, he's just got this attitude about him. He's just like, if shoulda, coulda, woulda, you know, like, could have been so much better.
I will honestly say that in his young career, that dude, there is no reason why he does not have a podium. Like, none. Just sheer, dumb, stupid, bad luck is why he doesn't. But overall, I mean, he was what? When did Kubica come in? I can't even remember.
I don't know. I'd have to look that one up.
That dude was a badass. I will take.
I want to say 2014.
Was it 2014?
Was it that late?
That's what I want to say, but I could be very far off.
Could be right. Let's see.
I don't know.
No.
I think he might be right. Or are you thinking of Kvyat? I don't remember whenever Kubica came in.
Oh,
That dude.
He started 2008.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wait, no, that was his first. His first win was in 2008.
I was thinking Pravat, though. That was
Kubica?
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah. Hold on. I didn't think
Okay.
he was in that early. Hold on. Let's see here.
Yeah, it says
Beach joined.
Let's see.
2011.
Formula One.
He was
First entry, 2006 Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yeah, he was
First win,
racing for
2008
BMW
Canadian
Sauber.
Grand Prix. Yeah, I thought, like I said, I thought it was earlier than that. Yep, BMW.
Fuck me. Anyways, yeah, no, that's one of those talents that he was just finally starting to get the car underneath of him and everything, and then that crash, dude. Oh my god.
But yeah,
I'm
I mean,
surprised
they
he
had
made
one
it back
pole,
in.
one win, one fastest lap.
He was never the same after that crash, though. Like,
No,
No.
yeah,
that's true.
It was. I think, one of those. One thing that I would cite is like supporting evidence for my theory about Checo after Monaco
Mhm.
is like when you get into a really severe crash like that, I think it really makes you start to think
Yeah.
and reevaluate your priorities and what really matters in your life, and also just where you are in your career and the way things are going. Let's talk about this, Jay, because do we think Horner's on record right now saying like Lawson could underperform and not do well, Checo could underperform and not do well? This may not be the end of DR3.
Max might underperform.
No. Anyways,
Max's
wishful
dad
thinking there.
might
Let me-
underperform and run his mouth to the media too much.
Let me say something.
Toto
about-
might actually perform properly and get Max.
Let me tell you something. I got to go back on my horse here for a minute. Horner is a lying sack of shit. Horner is a pandering piece of trash.
Wait, no,
He's
you're
a
confusing him
media-
with average British people.
manipulator.
That
You're-
he's just
you're-
British.
He's of course he's saying this because in the aftermath of Red Bull completely screwing the pooch on the way they handled this entire thing, he's saying what people want to hear because anybody that's going to blame Red Bull for the way it was handled, they're looking at Horner first. He's the tip of that spear. I know, Jay. Go ahead.
No. They're going to look at Marco first because Marco is the fucking cocksucker of the group. Let's be real here. He is the one that says,
Marco's
I make every
taking
driver
things seriously.
decision. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Christian's
talks
just
so
the
much that you
shower
can't.
of the group.
You can't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It was a thumb. Anyways,
it was the thumb. Yeah, I just don't buy it. I do believe that they offered him an ambassador role because it would be in their best interest to do so. Because what they want to capitalize on now is the goodwill that his reputation as the driver he created for himself brings to the table. So they want to leverage that.
So here's the biggest thing. he has said constantly that he wants Daniel Ricciardo back in the car. Marco is literally the only one in Red Bull who does not want DR3 back in a Red Bull. The only reason Marco doesn't want him back is, well, there's a couple of reasons probably. He told Marco to take his nice fucking shiny new contract, shine it up really nice and pretty, and shove it up his ass. You know? So there's one. Two, he's Horner's boy and always has been. The Horner and Marco fights are well documented. So I actually do not think Horner is talking out of his ass, because he could have just said, you know what? Marco is the one who decided to pull the trigger. We want to test where Lawson is, see how he compares against Yuki. Simple as that. He could have passed everything off on Marco, or he could have passed it off on the RB stakeholders that want those younger drivers in that car. There is no reason why he would have had to pass it off. Right now, he is preparing Daniel that he may or may not come back. Like, we're not giving you 100% because Lawson can show up. If he can show up, we are going to put him in that seat. They've already said Yuki is not coming. Like, period. End of story. Yuki will not drive a Red Bull. So you have Lawson and Max next year. If Lawson does not pan out, he's gone. Like, they're not even going to give him a second shot. They'll bring Hajar up to the RB to race against Yuki. And who are they going to put in that second seat? They're going to want somebody with experience that can drive very similar style to Max, because right now they are trying to have both of their drivers comfortable, and it's not working. It's that simple at this point. One of the drivers is going to have to be uncomfortable. So the easiest way to do it, Checo, take your ass back to Mexico. Bye. That is literally the easiest way to handle all of this. And everybody's
I think it'll be better phrased than that.
You think Helmut Marko is going to tell him
Jesus.
something, anything different than that? The person who said he was from South America. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah, you forgot about that one, didn't you, Rich? Anyways.
I will never defend Helmut Marko or the things that come out of his mouth. So yeah, no, don't put me into that picture. That's not something I'll do. I would hope they'd give him a little bit better send off. The Mexican Grand Prix send off would make sense. One of the things that I like that jogs it in my brain that like this isn't the end of DR3 was not the send off that they would give to DR3. Not this like. Okay, so like this may be we were right, and this is why I wanted to like tee this up, is because I don't think that this is the end. And not just out of nostalgia and personal affinity and respect for the driver that DR3 is, it's because of the person that he is. He's the reason why so many people fell in love with Drive to Survive. He's like the most personable guy that like everybody can kind of feel and relate to. He's openly emotionally vulnerable about his struggles and while he's going through them. And I think that's what lends him so well to the fans, and especially new fans. And he's just a funny character, you know, but he was a huge part of the growth of this sport. They've already said he will always have an ambassadorship role with Red Bull. They love him. You know, he's part of their family. Everybody wants that for him. And wants him on the grid signing autographs and taking pictures with people, especially as Texas comes up, you know, like it's like one of his favorite races, and he's always doing his big outfits and riding horses and, you know, all that other fun stuff. Yeah. I mean, he's constantly embracing the American culture. And it's one of the reasons why I think it did so well and translated so well over here. We didn't have an American driver. He was kind of like our closest thing, you know?
Well, I'll say this about DR3, just looking at him and the way he handled it. Okay. And I'm going to focus and pivot from that perspective. He handled it like that was it. He handled that fastest lap like that was it. He handled it like he's got it resolved in his mind that commentating or something in that neck of the woods, keeping him in the sport and close to the paddock, is where this is going. Because I don't think that he's got enough resolve left for more criticism of his skill and his driving left in him at this point. And it really looked like the combination of the fastest lap, which when you watch it, it's amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just perfectly clean, right? He gets the fastest lap. The fact that he stayed at the track was arguably the last driver to leave. Probably one of the last people from any of the teams to leave, because that was documented by a friend of his from high school that's a photojournalist and journalist of Formula One. He handled it like that was the last time as a driver that he would walk away from a circuit, down to the look back at the venue, the whole 9 yards. So I'm pretty convinced in my own mind that with all those things being what they were, that he's got it made up in his head that he will be doing something different. And I don't know that he would allow himself to possibly be humiliated again. He's already been really humiliated by the way this was handled. I can't fathom that the guy would want to possibly put on another fire suit and jump into a Red Bull anything after all that. That's just been me imparting some of my own personal feelings about it through Daniel's eyes. You know what I mean?
So that's all solid logic, though. Like if he's staying and being the last one to leave the track, although some of this could be prompted, and this is where it's a little conspiracy, is like, hey, this may or may not be your last race. You know, like we will see how Lawson and Checo do throughout the rest of this season, but this is probably going to be your last year. You know, and whether it's your last time in a car or not, you know, we love you. You're still part of the family, but that would all play out pretty well in my mind. Is like, hey, we don't know if this is going to be your last time, but it might be, man. You know, sink it in. You know, let it all be a part of it. It's still so fucking shitty though, and like such a just the dirty end of the business in Formula One, the cold callousness of it all. You know, like this guy's been doing this for 13 years. You know, yeah, he left your team, but like, come on, you know, let him go out with as much dignity and respect as he's owed. And Red Bull may not actually feel that he's owed that much dignity or respect the way that he left them. So maybe that plays into that too. You know, hurt feelings, Helmut Marko, even Christian Horner, you know. That still may be there. They may not have been prioritizing the same way fans of his would. You know, the way that I would prioritize his send off.
Right.
So I've got 3 C's for you. Controversy creates cash. Netflix is going to straight up eat this shit up. Visa and Cash App are literally at Red Bull's throats at the moment because of this shit. And then all of a sudden they back off real quick. Like nothing. So I would, and plus Spa was how many races ago? 3? 4? I can't remember right now. But everybody was under the impression to include Max and Horner that Ricciardo was going to be his teammate. Literally. So Ricciardo did absolutely nothing wrong in those 4 races. No crashes. He was still finishing where he probably should have in that V-Carb. Because let's be real here. At Monza, they had issues with the V-Carb in general. Baku, it wasn't running that good. Singapore definitely wasn't running that good except for that fastest lap. And there was one other race in there, and I can't remember which one it was now. So 4 races. He did absolutely nothing different in those 4 races that would have excluded him from that Red Bull seat. All they are doing is either, like I said before, Liberty Media came down and said, wait a minute, guys. We have Mexico coming up. We have COTA coming up. We have Las Vegas coming up. We need Checo in this seat. He is one of the favorite drivers for this country. If we lose out on this money, it's going to be huge. And we know that. You also have the Disney Plus series coming down that is all about Checo during 2023. So there's that. Then you have Carlos Slim, who's literally just Mexican god down there with money, saying, I've backed this dude his whole career. If you think you're letting go of him right before my series is about ready to come out, you got another fucking thing coming. So what makes sense is Checo is retired at the Mexican Grand Prix. Hell, he may even win the Mexican Grand Prix just to give him that nice little send-off to fuck off into the distance. The whole reason why Red Bull did not let him do it, to go out with pride, with dignity, everything that he should have, or even a celebration of his racing career, is because they know he's not fucking done. Lawson is not it. Period. End of story. He did not do enough in the 5 races that he had. Out of the 5 races that he had, they only finished 3 of them. Yes, he beat Yuki on 2 of those, or 3 of those races. However, what did you do wrong in the other 2 races to not finish? And that would take some looking into. Now, mind you, Marco is literally on his way out. I say he's got 2, maybe 3 more seasons before he either dies, which I don't wish that on anybody, obviously, or he's just going to be like, I've had enough. I can only be racist for so long. I'm going to retire. Like, those really are his options at this point, because F1's heading into a place where they're not going to tolerate it anymore. So it's like, there's no place for Marco. You're welcome for that, by the way. There's no place for somebody like Marco anymore. If Mateschitz was still alive, I would say Marco's going to be there for another 10 fucking years, but he's not. You know, like, straight up, Marco's gone. At that point, Horner has full control. They're not going to hire somebody else like Marco. Like, not even just attitude, but I'm saying like driver development, anything like that, because Horner wants control. So with that, if he is gone as soon as I think he is, which word that I've heard is Marco's gone at the end of this season, because he doesn't want to deal with the bullshit, and that's why they got rid of Max's clause that Max can leave if Marco leaves. So, and it was funny enough, Marco that talked him out of it. Like, talked Max to get rid of that clause.
Bold prediction for you for Red Bull before we jump into our Coda. No, you're good.
For Coda or for rest of the season?
Rest of the season for Red Bull, because you were kind of on a roll there, and then we'll transition into our Coda predictions.
Rest of the season, V-Carb is Yuki's just gonna beat Lawson like the little blonde bitch that he is, and call it a day.
So angry.
I don't like Lawson at all.
What did Liam Lawson ever do to you?
You got to remember, Zuri Yips was on the same fucking stream that Lawson was whenever he got fired. Like, Lawson set his ass up. If you watch the stream, like, literally Lawson set his ass up for that shit. And
so elaborate, because people may not understand what you're talking about right now. So give the backstory there.
Yuri Zips, I can't remember his full fucking name right now off the top of my head. Was an Academy Red Bull driver about 2 to 3 years ago.
A streaming incident where he said something?
Yes. Him and Lawson were teammates. They were streaming together. I think they were playing Call of Duty or something. And as one does in Call of Duty, if anybody spent any time in those lobbies, a remark came out of Yuri's mouth that really shouldn't have. And Red Bull dropped him like a day or 2 later, I think, after they reviewed the film and everything like that. They dropped him. Of course, that promotes Lawson up. Now, him and Lawson were playing together. They were talking shit, everything like that. So Lawson kind of set him up, in my opinion. Just because he was actually better than Lawson was.
Individual responsibility when you're streaming. and you say what
absolutely.
you say.
Absolutely. I'm not taking anything.
That being
from what
said,
he did.
thank God none of the lobbies I was in Modern Warfare 2.
Did you
in
see
the
that
heyday.
Xbox? Did you see that Xbox is going back 10 years now? We're fucked.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I haven't played in longer than 10 years, but yeah, no,
okay.
thank God. Let's go ahead and get to the Circuit of America's prediction before I cancel myself.
Sorry. Ricardo will be back in the seat. Ricardo will be back in the seat after Mexico. Perez is going to announce his retirement. Yeah.
I like it. That's my prediction too. I'm with you in the fact that like that send off was not what they wanted to give him. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think there's too many examples of a lack of loyalty in the sport for me to buy it whole hog. But I hope it's not. I really truly hope that it's not. I hope we get to see him doing some donuts at the end of the year, and then he gets the send off that he deserves, in my opinion. We're going to transition into our predictions for the COTA Grand Prix. Meg is out this week. She's unfortunately sick and lost her voice.
I got hers for you. They're in there.
Okay, yeah, she's got P1 Piastri, P2 Norris, P3 Verstappen. I like that. I can't really argue against that. That seems like almost a little safe bet, but I'll let her defend her predictions when she comes back on. Greg, who do you got for COTA?
All right, so you know me, I don't really have a way of predicting the future, but I will say this. COTA is one of those tracks where flexi wings are going to come into play, and I don't just mean the rear wing, also the front wing. So with those twisty bits where you have to chase and you have to make downforce in order to put down a good lap time through those twisty bits, man, I think I think Mercedes is going to show better than they normally would, and of course McLaren, they're still going to be solid. So Max will be there on pure grit, and who knows about Ferrari? As we saw in 2012, Ferrari just finds ways to ruin things. So I'm all about seeing things be shaken up. So I'd love to see some random person up there in the fight that we don't think belongs there, because to me that is genuinely enjoyable to watch F1. So there you go. I don't know who's going to be on what podium, but I think that's what's going to happen as far as breaking it down.
Fabian, we'll go ahead and give it over to you.
Well, so COTA's made some changes, some resurfacing. They got rid of some bumps because of Max's blurry vision problems, so they're trying to help him out a little bit. He was paying attention. So I've got Piastri, P1. I like Piastri on twisty tracks. I think he's got really good focus. He's had no DNFs. He's raced every lap. I mean, the guy's been on a tear. So I think that's where that goes. Norris is looking clean. He's looking good. He's looking like he's got what it takes to really make a run for this thing. Despite the fact that he had his little rubs in the last race, where I think he was just pushing too hard for something he didn't need. And he probably has been schooled and coached on that a good bit. And he probably thought about it in his rest over this little break. I think he'll have his shit together. And Leclerc is the guy that's also been kind of really interesting. Every time I think Mercedes is going to be right there, this guy's like just, on it. So I think I could easily see a Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, P1, 2, P3. That's what I see. I also found out that heard that COTA did some more revisions. They've added some cameras and some gravel and some stuff going on. So there's going to be some, I think Max is going to DNF in this race, to be honest with you. I think Max they're going to come with a new package. This track is his nemesis from his blurred vision days. I think that he's going to have a lot on his mind. He's going to push too hard. His hubris is going to get the best of him, and he's going to be out of this race.
Jay, we'll kick it over to you. What are you thinking?
He says Fabian's out of his mind.
You're on mute.
Sorry.
You muted.
So Fabian, really, with the vision thing. I mean, Lewis Hamilton could have been having vision problems after taking a tire to the head. I'm just throwing it out there. He's just smart enough not to say something. As far as everything goes, Norris had one decent race, and even that was plagued with fuck-ups. Like, realistically, and we have been talking about this for a while, Piastri is the better driver. And Lando this week has come out and said, oh, I'm not going to buy into team orders and this, that, and the other. If he beats me, he beats me. Yada, yada, yada. And so I think Piastri's going to hear that and be like, I got you, bitch. Let's roll. Those two are going to take each other out before the end of the year. Like, it is literally a matter of time. Papaya rules or not. Yeah, whatever. So anyways, my prediction for the podium is going to be, oh, this pains me to say this, Charles Leclerc on the top step, followed by Max, because I think the upgrade package they're going to bring, those two teams are actually going to do something. From what I've heard so far, McLaren is not bringing anything to COTA.
They don't need to continue.
I don't. Well, with that back wing change, they might need to. But regardless, so they're also due for an engine failure. Let's be real here. They have.
So you got Leclerc P1,
Max P2, Lando or Piastri P3, P4.
Okay,
and that can go either which way.
Your Norris comment about him being a fuck up. Let me tell you what the problem is that let me do Jay and tell you what you're forgetting. What you're forgetting is he's driving the fastest freaking car out there. You can expect him to have a couple of little mess ups because he's trying to freaking Bronco bust a freaking McLaren out there. That's what's going on. It's not his driving. He's in a beast.
You're right. It's not his driving. It's this right here. And that's where he's fucking up. He makes one time where he actually leads every lap. Jesus fucking Christ. How many times is he actually going to get able to do that? Because I don't think it's going to be many. Because he's a fucking head case. And his own teammate is going to be the better fucking player in that game. But yeah, no. I'm saying Ferrari, Red Bull, then the two McLarens. I don't know which way they would go. Just because it all depends on, is Piastri going to listen to what Norris said about no team orders? So.
I like it all. So I've got Piastri first, Leclerc second, Lando third. Kind of same prediction as Fabian, a lot of similar reasons. The upgrades, I also agree. I don't think that McLaren really needs to bring any upgrades. I am curious because the cars can be worked on. Unlike the summer break, this autumn or fall break, you can work on the cars and you can bring upgrade packages in. I don't think that whatever Mercedes brings is going to be enough to catapult them over McLaren or Ferrari. So I just don't think it's gonna be too much or too extreme, similar to what we've seen when they've been bringing upgrades in the season. It takes a minute to adjust. It almost takes like a full race weekend for them to adjust to the upgrades. So I'm not expecting a big turnout for Mercedes. For Red Bull, kind of the same thing. I don't expect their upgrade packages to settle down and settle in for the first weekend after a break. And so that's just kind of my thought process on that. So, yeah, I'm going Papaya weekend, first and third, with Leclerc splitting the two of them. Closing comments. Was there anything we missed, Jay? Did we miss anything about 2012?
So I actually forgot to bring this up with the Seb thing. It's not 2012, but 2012 because he won. But Red Bull allowed Seb, whenever he retired, to rock his lid on his last race that he wore while he ran with Red Bull. Like, literally, I don't think they're going to let Ricciardo go out the way that he did. Just because Seb left them in a lot dirtier of a way than Ricciardo did. And I personally think that they have enough respect for their drivers that brought them the fame and everything like that. Like, let's be real here. It's not an Albon. It's not Gasly. It's not Kvyat. It's literally one of their top, most recognizable racers of all time in their history. So that is the main thing where I'm like, I don't think they're going to let him go out like that. But yeah, no, outside that, I got nothing.
I saw something online that substantiates your theory there, actually, was that DR3 had a custom helmet made for Texas already. And it didn't say how long he'd had it, but it was like he was clearly not under the impression before Singapore that he was going to be leaving the team. I really, really, really do hope that we are right on this one and that I was wrong where that was his last race, because I think we're all in agreement here in concurrence that DR3 deserves a much better send-off than that. Regardless, it's been a fantastic run for him from 2011 through 2024. And he certainly gave his all to this sport and gave it all to the fans. So nothing but respect and appreciation for that man. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap. We will talk to you guys next week, next Monday. And yeah, we'll have another fun episode. And yeah, see you guys next week.
Awesome. Terrific. Great job. Hey, Greg, good job on the
Later, guys.
TikTok. That was fabulous.